Okay, for those who are on a bit early today, or on time, I should say, those who are on time with us today, thanks very much for joining us for our public webinar series, which take place monthly. As we're expecting a few more participants to slide in today, while others are going to receive the recording, as everyone will, for each of our webinars there. So you can feel free that if you'd like to take notes throughout or screenshots, you will be receiving the presentation as well, having registered for the webinar. So thanks for your interest to this point. My name's Greig Ward. I'm the Learning and Development Manager here at the Marketing Sales Group. And what we do with each of our monthly webinars is aim to introduce people to sort of used to be like a lunch and learn, a bit late for lunch and learn if you're in Australia at the moment. But we have an opportunity to highlight some of the content that we put within some of our programs, and it's quite topical for our audience, and it's sometimes requested from our members or our external audience as well. So for those of you who are new to it, thanks very much for joining us. For those who are returning to a successive webinar, thanks very much for your ongoing interest there. Our objective is to keep it inside the 30 minutes. So I'm going to punch steadily through, and I'm going to share some of the content with you, looking today at our topic of effective sales behaviours. Now, the focus on the behaviours is probably of importance to many people, hence the registration in interest. The focus on the behaviours, as we'll see today, is trying to separate behaviours from the skills. They're both absolutely necessary with a professional sales role, whether you're emerging or established in your role. But we're going to focus more on the behaviours today, what some people refer to as the soft skills. So as you'll see, the three areas we're going to look at and touch on each of these today while moving quite steadily. And I'll also show you at the very end some of the resources that I've been utilising within the programs, especially our Sales Accelerator program, some of the authors and the research that's gone behind it. So I'll have some references at the very end that you can see that we've utilised for today's webinar and for our program. So we'll look at hard versus soft skills, the role of emotional intelligence in sales, and thirdly, how do we enhance our softer sales skills there? So to give us some clarification to begin with, and it's not quite necessarily a definition, but trying to put some discrepancy between what are hard skills and what are soft skills. And we get asked this a lot of the time from managers who are putting their staff through sales training and sales coaching, like how much attention should they give to the specifics of the sales skills that are necessary? That is the familiarity with the applications that they might be using in their sales role, versus how much should they be trying to guide them and assist them and establish and develop their softer skills, which are their behaviours. So as you can see here, the hard skills are really, we acquire somewhat through what we call theoretical learning. For those people who are familiar with the 70-20-10 model of coaching, it's the 10%, the theory component, where we pick up some of the harder skills. And that can be not just the theoretical, but the application of the theory within it. So for some people in sales, that could easily be use of sales tracking materials, the use of CRMs, the use of reporting tools from in the field if they're field-based sales agents. And the softer skills we can see here incorporate personality traits. And these personality traits, so they're not cognitive abilities, which are learned and brain-focused, I suppose you might say, but these are more behavioural. And an example I've given here might be the teamwork that a sales staff, amongst the sales staff, if you're going to launch into a new campaign or a new product, or you've got a large event or a showcase that might be taking place where you really need to collaborate together. So that's a bit of a clarification between them. We can also consider them as the competencies versus the behaviours. So competencies are much more specific to the task at hand, what's more required. So if you were thinking, well, it's not skill related, but if you were thinking of anyone in the trade related field, it'd be their familiarity with the tools, the equipment they're using, the site regulations and specifications. Whereas behaviours are what are the things that are going to allow the willingness to comply to those regulations, the understanding and the support of those guidelines, and maximising the use of other people on the team as well as possible. So the behaviours kick in here. So how do we measure them? It's probably interesting, and for especially those of us who are in HR and been in a HR role before, we say, well, how do we assess someone's hard skills versus their soft skills? And in some regards, we look at the hard skills being more measurable, and this is, they're more tangible. And we tend to use numerical or yes/no criteria. That's not uncommon at all for us. Soft skills are less tangible, and they're sometimes harder to quantify, as I've mentioned there, and we don't always use qualitative scales. Sorry, don't use quantitative scales, we use qualitative scales. So a salesperson may be a great user of the CRM software and may be really familiar with the software and its features, having used it for the last 5 years. They may be very familiar with the pipeline process in sales because they've been exposed to it for the last 12 months. So that would be what we might say the hard skills, and we can assess their effectiveness within that. Within the softer skills component, we might look at an element such as communication, and you can see we sometimes get these less tangible or subjective terms. As I put there, someone may be able to do something reasonably well. They're quite good at it. And so it's not as tangible, and it creates a bit of a grey area for some people. It doesn't have to be that way, and there are quite a few models that bring the objectivity back into the softer skills. And so we'll look at one of those at least today. If evaluating these skills, we can look at, and again, for those people assessing, do I take this person on? What is their level of competency in their hard versus soft skills? And hard skills, we often put the competencies in things like our resumes. We might say we've got a PhD in widget manufacturing. We also can ask role-specific questions, and we can look at the level to which a task is performed. So that gives us that objectivity. Softer skills, usually we need to be asking situational or behavioural questions. For those who've ever interviewed for a role before, you're probably familiar with behavioural-based interviewing processes. And we might ask behavioural-based questions. So if we want to determine how well someone will participate in a leadership role, we would ask leadership-type questions. When have they been in that situation? What was their behaviour in that situation? What was the impact? What some people refer to as SBI, situation, behaviour, and impact. So we often ask role-related questions to help us understand that. So let's push aside the hard skills and focus a bit on the soft skills. And if you'll let me indulge you, I'm going to sort of start with a story. And if I can share this story with you, some of you may, depending on your age, and this is not meant to be age biased at all, but you may remember the work of Dr. Seuss when you were young. And Dr. Seuss, very familiar from my ilk, and those people probably a bit younger than me, with the cat in a hat, Horton lays an egg, etc. The Grinch, who stole Christmas, some of his best work. However, he was more well known as an author than J.K. Rowling is now. So I'm going to share a story from one of his great books called Green Eggs and Ham. And Green Eggs and Ham was put out in 1960. So don't feel bad if you don't know it. And Green Eggs and Ham has two characters, It and Sam. And It is attempting to persuade, Sam is attempting to persuade It to try green eggs and ham. And here's a short excerpt, and this is sort of how it goes. And Sam says, "Do you like green eggs and ham?" And it says, "I don't like them, Sam, I do not like green eggs and ham." "Would you like them here or there?" "I would not like them here or there. I would not like them anywhere. I do not like green eggs and ham. I do not like them, Sam, And Sam continues, "Would you like them in a house? Would you like them with a mouse?" It responds again, "I do not like them in a house. I do not like them with a mouse. I do not like them here or there. I do not like them anywhere." And this goes on throughout the entire book. And yes, it's a children's book. We'll get to the point in a moment. Sam suggests It tries green eggs and ham in a car, in a tree, in the dark, in a box, with a fox, in the rain, on a train, on a boat, and even tries them with a goat. Now, this continues and continues and continues. And then the It character continues to object until the point where Sam says, "You don't like them, so you say, try them and you may. Try them and you may, I say." At which point It replies, "Sam, if you will let me be, I will try them, you will see." It tastes the green eggs and ham and then responds, "Hey, I like green eggs and ham. I do like them, Sam, I would eat them in a tree. I would eat them when I'm free, in a boat, with a goat, etc., etc." Now, what's to be learned from this, and why am I sharing this story? The key thing from it within is probably what we call the sales genius. And the sales genius is a few examples in sales that was used within the books. And this has been used by sales coaches worldwide for probably the last 20 years as an example, but don't feel surprised if you haven't heard it before. A couple of tips for us that Sam maintained his offer. All right. So he didn't think at any stage that he has to reduce the offer. He didn't say just try the eggs or just try the ham. And he didn't drop the price at any stage, which is what a lot of salespeople do. They think, oh, if you don't like this, let me discount it for you. So he maintains his offer, and this is incredibly important, and it's the key role of persistence, as we'll see in a moment. The second key lesson we can learn from this is Sam did not challenge it. At no stage did he say, what's wrong with you? Why wouldn't you? Right? So there's no challenge, because if we get into a challenge, then we're going to create this what's called adversarial condition. So we're not challenging the person as to why they're not getting into it. We're just trying to find another angle. There's continuing to build value, right? So Sam continues to build value throughout, always thinking of another angle, another way to do it. Have I tried this angle? Have I talked about the goat thing? Have I talked about the tree? Did I tell them you can have them here or there? Always a different angle, trying to build value throughout. It's not just one-dimensional. And the last tip, in many ways, what a lot of people miss in sales, because they're so motivated by the sale for their own purpose and their own commission and their own personal motivations rather than for the customer, is that Sam had the right motive throughout. And that is, Sam had nothing to gain or to lose whether or not it tried the green eggs and ham. But Sam really wanted it to try green eggs and ham. And we sometimes find within this, each of these, while there's some elements of hard skills within there, some selling skills, there's also some emotional intelligence competencies that kick in. And that's a key part for us. So what I'd like to look, and thanks for my indulgence and taking me back to childhood, what we talk about the importance of emotional intelligence in sales. And since the work of Daniel Goleman and emotional intelligence, there's been a lot written about, and Travis Bradbury as well has done quite a bit of work in this as well, Dr. Travis Bradbury. And we've discussed emotional intelligence in a previous webinar, and feel free to reach out if you'd like to see a copy of that, if you haven't already received it from a previous registration. But to understand emotional intelligence, we also need to understand its role within sales. So emotional intelligence requires us to understand ourselves and our team members and our customers on a deeper level, right? Not on such a superficial level. And ideally moving our sales process to become less transactional and more relational. And the benefit when something moves from transactional to relational is that the customer feels they're engaged with rather than sold to. So a diagram that I love using is what we call business emotional intelligence, which you could easily substitute for sales emotional intelligence as well. And down the left-hand column, you can see that intrapersonal is us. So this is the effect on us. And interpersonal, sorry, on the right is dealing with others. So on the left, intra, within us, inter, between us and others. So we have the emotion. Are we aware of the emotion? So are we aware of ourselves? Do we know when we're on point, on game? Are we in tune with ourselves, or adversely? Do we know if we're off point, not at our best, something's missing? Are we self-aware? If our self-awareness is high, then we have greater chance of self-managing. So if and when we know we're at our best, we can maximize that to then do probably our hardest tasks. In this instance, it might be engaging with the customers being the most challenging, or cold calling if you've never done that before. Because you know you're at your best, you know you're on point, you know you're ready to go. Now take on the more challenging tasks. And when we can manage ourselves, we start being more in control of our own performance. So this self-awareness leads to self-management, and the self-management helps dictate our self-performance. If we're not aware of ourselves, well, how can we manage what we're not aware of? And therefore our performance is going to fluctuate based on the whims of the market. Interpersonal on the right-hand side is this: how aware are we of our audience, of others around us? So it might be our team members and colleagues, or it might be customers. How aware are we? How in tune are we? So can we read a room? So can we read nuances and subtleties in tonality of voice? Can we read nuances in body language, and how well people are engaging with us? Then what do we do with that information? So the relationship management is, how do we maximize our awareness of people to be able to manage the relationship and get the most out of it? And this is definitely not meant to be manipulative. It is meant to be where we start to build relationships with customers and or our team members. So if we're aware of what our customers' pain points and their challenges are, their moods, their emotions, their frustrations, their successes, etc., we can then manage that relationship more effectively. And thereby, we can help their performance as well. So emotional intelligence, put simply, and hopefully this diagram does quite well to explain the impact that each of them has. So our awareness will affect our relationship management on the right and will affect our management of ourself on the left, which directly impacts our self-performance and also the performance or engagement we might have within sales. So what are some of these softer skills? We call them positive sales behaviours. Within a lot of our programs at the Marketing Sales Group, specifically our Sales Accelerator program, we would spend more time, I would say, within our program talking about the softer skills and the impact of them than we do on the harder skills. And that varies depending on the audience. But if we have, it's rare that we're asked to train brand new sales staff who've never sold before. So therefore, we're not always tending to train in the harder skills because they are the practices within the business. We're usually asked to look at the principles of engagement and the principles of sales and the principles of maximizing those relationships. So here are 10 of the positive sales behaviors. There are more, but here is 10 we've chosen. I'm going to pull a couple apart just for example today. The role of empathy, perseverance, resilience, grit, professional courage, drive, self-motivation. You can see we've got 10 listed here. Now, in terms of empathy, what we probably want to look at is shifting our lens towards the audience or the customer, in this instance, being empathic, understanding of their situation. So we look through a different lens. Empathy and sympathy aren't the same thing, so let's never mistake one for the other. In terms of resilience, resilience is probably one of the greatest terms in sales, and one of the booklets I'll refer to in a moment highlights what we say. Resilience is the opportunity to use little challenges to help us get over the bigger challenges that we're going to fight later on. Resilience tends to happen before, right? We're put in a challenging event. Resilience doesn't necessarily happen during or after an event. So we need to build this resilience muscle in some regards. And that is facing difficulty, having been through difficulty before. It is why some of the more successful salespeople have probably had some of the most challenging situations they've been put in. They're not what we call downhill skiers. Grit, if you're not familiar with the term, I'll share Angela Duckworth's resource in a moment. Grit, I suppose if you wanted to try and define it, is the ability of you to persevere and put effort towards a goal or an objective in the presence of obstacles and challenges. It is considered probably the most secret ingredient to sales success and professional success that's not talked about enough. So the ability to persevere through periods of difficulty to work towards a goal. And we can see up on the right-hand side, compartmentalization is a term. We discuss it within our leadership program, our modern coach program, and within our sales accelerator program. And it's probably under-discussed in a lot of other areas. Compartmentalization in many ways is not being dismissive of someone's emotions or challenges or problems that they're facing. It's to help them focus on what is extremely important at that time and to not give too much energy to something that's out of their control. So compartmentalization here really looks at 3 steps. We have to look at what's the relevance, the priority, and the focus. So is this relevant to me right now? Is it a priority to me right now? And if or not, where should I put my focus? Which is, if you had not, and I often lightheartedly joke with audiences that if you hadn't walked your dog this morning, it shouldn't occupy your thought process throughout the day, because that would impact your success in sales or whatever you're trying to do. But just park it for later on to remind yourself that you do need to walk the dog. But even if you don't, it is a pack animal. It can survive probably for another 24 hours without a walk. But park it and not stress over those little things that are out of your control. And if you haven't got the dog with you and you haven't got the lead right with you right now, there's nothing you can do about it. But just park it for later on. This compartmentalization is a huge element that successful salespeople show that they can bring to the fore when is necessary. Optimism is a case study for those who receive our blog, our weekly blog. I shared this in our blog this week, and I think it's worth sharing again. Hence, I've got the slide today. Martin Seligman is considered the author of positive psychology. A bit of a guru in the space for those people who are familiar with positive psychology. He did a case study here with Metropolitan Life, so MetLife in the US. And as you can see here, they spent about $30,000 to train up their new sales staff to get into a stage where they're bordering on autonomous, that they can delegate to them and they can operate with minimal supervision. However, as you can see here, 80% of them, the new recruits, didn't meet expectations and ended up quitting or being managed out. This is a huge loss to any company. And so Seligman introduced a recruitment test for optimism, which he designed, that determines someone's optimism. And that is, if someone was highly optimistic, they were more suitable for the role, therefore they go to the top of the recruitment resumes for being interviewed and or second round interviews. And they end up having more candidates higher in optimism because that's what they recruited for, 33% more sales, and 24 months later, this is what we call the ripple effect, 24 months later, sales staff and retention both thriving. So another soft skill, but soft skill produces hard results, and we can never forget that. Soft skills produce hard results. Right? It's not that they are intangible at times. There are many, many tangibles from it. Something else you may be familiar with, and we discussed this quite a bit, we sometimes I use the term emotional homeostasis, but you can see on the left scale here, it's called happiness. So on this hedonic treadmill, which is the title for it, this hedonic treadmill, we have on the vertical here, you can see happiness, what I call emotional homeostasis, which is our happy point, the point we like to be at. So just as our body temperature is a core of 36.8 degrees, you have a positivity need of maybe 50, 60, 70, percent, whatever it might be. And so that's where we call your baseline. Now, and this is time on the horizontal, and we can see that what tends to happen is there's going to be peaks and there's going to be troughs and there's going to be peaks and there's going to be troughs. One of the models that's used, and it's used by in his book, The Attributes, which is Rich Divany, and it talks about individuals that have the ability to reset back to their baseline quicker. So we can see the gaps in the waves here, that yes, it's happy and you should carry happy things forward, unless it's going to be detrimental to your performance. If you're still caught up in the moment of kicking that goal, could you miss the next opportunity when the ball comes to you because you're still a bit euphoric and you really got to get back to ground zero? So this ability to return to our baseline after an event, whether it be positive or negative, allows us to restore to our normal or our best place of operation. Now, there's a rule that's built into this called the 2-minute rule, and it's a good practice to try and to take upon yourself and to see if you can build it in or to coach it into others. That is, after a negative or a bad occurrence, especially, that we allow ourselves 2 minutes, 2 minutes to dwell on it, to wallow in it, have a little bit of a pity party if that's really what you need. But after that 2 minutes, return to the baseline and carry on, right? To carry on to try and get back to that baseline. By the same token, if we have a great occurrence, a great win or a success, share that with others, celebrate it, enjoy it. But after it, come on, let's get back to the grind. We need to get back to what we're doing. So this 2-minute reset rule is a great practice for what we call, we'll have the hedonic treadmill, we'll have the highs and the lows. It's just how far those waves are apart and how much they impact productivity, performance in between. The grit scale, there's Angela Duckworth. This is, at the start of the webinar I mentioned, there are some harder assessments or more objective assessments for some of the softer skills. So Angela Duckworth in her grit scale, and her grit scale you can find on her website, angeladuckworth.com, or just type in grit scale into a search. There's 10 questions, and these are some of the questions you'll ask, and it says, not like me, always like me, never like me, one of those, a scale of 1 to 5. And what Duckworth's attempting to find is how resilient or how much grit do you have? So you can see from the questions there, new ideas, projects can distract me from previous ones, what I call bright, shiny object syndrome. Setbacks don't discourage me. I don't tend to give up easily. Where do you sit on that scale there? I set a goal but later choose to pursue a different one. I'm diligent. I never give up. And so within her assessment, there is a way of taking a softer skill, that is grit, and putting an objectivity to it And so it's a good little thing to play around with yourself. Where do you sit? And if you're coaching or encouraging a team of sales staff, it'd be a great one to give to them to see how they perform according to Angela Duckworth, who's the author of the book Grit, that we'll find in a moment. One other, just as I come towards the end, and apologies if this is moving too steady or too fast for some people. I'd love to be able to dive into each of those, but again, today is meant to be a teaser and some insights, and it provides some tips and ideas for those people trying to build or exercise the resilience muscles or the optimism muscles that are in there. We discuss within our programs with managers, especially sales managers who are recruiting new sales staff or trying to get their performance up, that there's a bit of an inverse relationship in developing sales skills. And you can see the red, and it's not plummeting. It's just the best diagram I could find, so apologies for that. But attention or focus on sales skills over time. When someone is lacking the skills, the hard skills, when someone's lacking the sales skills, they need to be coached on the sales skills, the hard skills. That is how to engage with the customer, what are their hot spots, to reading those hot spots, the ability to close, whatever it might be. They're all the harder skills. They need those. Without those, doesn't matter how good their attitude, if they don't know how to sell, they can't sell. So there's a high focus on that when someone begins in a sales career. You can see, though, the green is meant to reflect what happens on our coaching, or the importance of behaviours over time. Now, fortunately, because we tend to recruit people, ideally recruiting people that are positive about finding a job or finding employment or changing their role into a new sales career, they're usually going to be relatively positive and enthusiastic about the role. So we don't have to work too much on that at the beginning. Once sales skills, this diagram is hopefully identifying there's a tipping point. As Malcolm Gladwell said, what got you here won't get you there. What I mean by that is, once someone has established their sales skills and they're having some success and their skills are getting more, their hard skills are becoming more consolidated to a stage where they're established, they don't have to focus as much on the sales skills as much. Now the real attention is on the softer skills. And those softer skills we were talking before about, they're going to need to be working on their emotional intelligence, they're going to need to work on their resilience, their persistence, their enthusiasm, their ability to reset after maybe a less than engaging or less than promising outcome with the customer. And once they can do that, we start to realize it's the behaviors that will get them to the next level, right? The sales skills are always necessary and they won't unlearn those. So there we have some of the key points I wanted to share with you today in our bit of a lunch and learn, or mid-afternoon tea, lunch and learn. These are the 6 resources that I've tapped into for today's webinar. All our courses, programs, webinars, and we say research or evidence or historically based. And they're not just the opinions of us at the Marketing Sales Group. So we try and support them. On the bottom right, you see Angela Duckworth's book, amazing book, if you're into that, the difference that perseverance can make. The bottom middle, Rich Diviney identified 23 or 24 attributes that, or 25, sorry, 25 that really lift performance. While his focus is on the military, it is as relevant in any other business as well. Barbara Fredrickson does what's called the positivity ratio, and she also looks at the role. And she realized that if we have more positive emotions than negative emotions, we increase our chance to success. And on her cover, she reminds us that the ratio of that is 3 to 1. The Resilience Project, awesome, more on the mindfulness, but gratitude, empathy, and mindfulness. Hugh Van Cuylenberg, he also has a podcast with Ryan Shelton called The Imperfects, which is worth listening to. Peak Performance, Stulberg and Magnus, they have some great things on the science of success. And probably what I call the modern Bible of sales, in probably the most digestible format put together, is Daniel Pink's To Sell Is Human. So thanks very much for your involvement and joining us today. As I mentioned, being a webinar, we don't have a chance to chat between each other, and it's not set up to open up too much to a forum. We do that in other formats at other times, but today was a chance to be able to share that with you and a bit of insight into our Sales Accelerator program, also some of these behaviours. Letting you know, our next month, each month we have these webinars. Next month is looking at the culture. within businesses, and how can we get it right within our teams, within our companies. And again, an absolute essential in businesses today in the 2020s and moving beyond. Thanks again for your time today. Appreciate it. If you have any messages or questions you want, please feel free to put them into the chat. We save our chat for any questions that might be if you want us to reach out specifically to you. You'll also have our email address, hopefully, through the invitation to the webinar as well. Once again, thank you very much for your attendance today and participation, and we may see you again in a month's time, and hopefully reach out if there's anything we can help you with in terms of the sales, leadership, customer service or management space. Thanks, everyone.